Hey guys, how you doing? Luna here with a new video. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm really excited because we're talking about one of my favorite artists of all time. We're talking about Paul McCartney. As you may or may not know, the Beatles are my favorite band ever. You know, I love every single one of their albums, so obviously talking about one of my favorite members from the band is something I'm really excited about, especially because we're talking about an opinion that has been going on since the 70s when John Lennon said this famous comment about Paul only writing silly love songs. Honestly, you know, anyone that knows Paul's discography well enough know that this is completely false, but this is a comment that people seem to, believe it's true. Even today, 50 years after, the comment was originally made. Every time I do one of these research videos, which is my favorite type of video to make on the channel, I get a lot of people that seem to argue that no one's actually saying that, no one actually believes this is true. Some people believe I'm clickbaiting, but if you go on Twitter, if you go on YouTube or places like Reddit, you know that a lot of people seem to believe that Paul actually was only a hit maker, someone that liked to do some pretty melodies, put it over a rock song, and that's it. And that is just completely false, and I'm about to explain my reasoning, my reasons why I think this is just not true. To understand what people are saying this, we have to go back to the Beatle years. Basically, everyone considered Paul as the cute Beatle, the most melodic Beatle, and the reason why is because in the early years of the band, Paul was the better singer. He was the best performer of the band. John Lennon was more dedicated to rock and roll performances where he was able to go all out with his voice, and even if it doesn't sound that good, what matters is the energy. And Paul often got the most melodic or prettiest melodies because he was able to perform them correctly. His voice was really smooth, he was really pretty, had a really elegant texture on it. I'm not saying that Paul McCartney was a better performer than John Lennon, even though I do believe it's the case. I also think that John Lennon was one of the best and more creative performers of the 60s, so I'm not throwing shades at John at all. I'm just saying that the reason why Paul McCartney was seen as the hit maker and the cute one and the more pop one was because he was capable of singing these songs and his voice was the prettiest one of the band. We also have to say that Paul McCartney was a really handsome man in the 60s, so that also played a really big part in him being considered the cute one. If we jump back to the late Beatle years, 69, 68, we see that both John Lennon and Paul McCartney were doing some really interesting songwriting decisions that were really creative. They were doing things like Helter Skelter and everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. But again, it seems like John was always a step ahead in terms of creativity or uniqueness, doing songs like Strawberry Fields Forever, being the main songwriter from A Day in the Life, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And this narrative went on after the band broke up because on one side we have Plastic Ono Band, which even today is one of the most interesting and unique expressions of feelings, of inner demons that music has ever seen. And Paul McCartney was doing McCartney 1, that even though it's a great album, it's way more simple and not as personal and raw as John Lennon's debut album. And if you dive deeper into the 70s with no context and not a lot of information, and you look at Paul McCartney's most popular songs, you can support this narrative that he was the silly love songs guy, because his most popular songs were Maybe I'm Amazed, My Love, Another Day, Silly Love Songs. But when you look at Paul's entire discography, even if you only look at the 70s, you can tell that in a lot of occasions Paul was as creative and even more creative than John Lennon, with like the entirety of Ram, for example, having songs like Ram On, Heart of the Country, Eat at Home, Monkberry Moon Delight. Tell me a single song from John Lennon's discography as interesting as Monkberry Moon Delight, with that type of performance, with that use of Russian waltz. Like, you won't find a song as weird as Monkberry Moon Delight in John Lennon's own discography. Does that make it better? Not necessarily, but I'm just saying, there is a lot of creative and unique material in Paul's discography too. The fact that he was able to do songs like Silly Love Songs, My Love, and Maybe I'm Amazed were only one of Paul's many skills. He also knew how to make a hit. Even in the Beatles, creativity doesn't only come in the form of songwriting. You can also be creative at the time of performing a track, which but Paul McCartney showed multiple times in tracks like Oh Darling, Obla Di Obla Da, Helter Skelter, Why Don't We Do It on the Road. He has so many times where he showed that he was a different creative and unique songwriter, and still people overlook that just because John Lennon said that he only wrote silly love songs. And I do know that when John Lennon said this, he was only talking about, his solo material, and especially this was a comment made really early in the 70s. I'm not saying that John Lennon actually believed this. I'm just saying that people say this because John said it at the time, and because John Lennon is such a respected, image in the music industry. A lot of people just go behind him and say the same thing that he's saying. Which leads me to a lot of people overrating John Lennon's discography and John Lennon's creativity. John Lennon made a really interesting and unique record with Plastic Ono Band, but when you jump to Imagine, things start to go really mainstream from there. And I know a lot of people doesn't like to hear this. I know a lot of people like to believe that John Lennon was this mastermind of creativity. And yes, during a time he was, but after Imagine, John Lennon albums are pretty standard. There's nothing that special about them. And if you don't believe me, you can go ahead and listen to those records and tell me what's so special about them. Honestly, the only thing that I believe it's at the same level of creativity and uniqueness as the things he did with the Beatles is a song like Dream Number 9, for example, which is an amazing track, a really creative one, and a track that doesn't really sound like anything else inside that album. But when you look at John's more popular tracks of the 70s, you have Whatever Gets You Through the Night, which is a really standard rock and roll song. You also have songs like Mind Games. What's special about that track other than, it's a really well written track, but what is unique about that track? Actually, I think it's way more mainstream than a song like Jet from Paul McCartney and Wings. And nothing from Milk and Honey and Double Fantasy is really that weird or special either. Actually, it's the fact that it's so laid back and so melodic. That's the reason why people love that album so much. You don't always need to have this experimental, unique bullshit to make something good. I believe that comment from John Lennon originally came out of his own insecurities about his performance. I think that he was not jealous, but he wasn't able to perform the same songs that Paul was able to perform because his voice wasn't really that melodic. And he has said this multiple times, claiming that the reason why his vocals are so echoed in albums like Imagine and Plastic Ono Band is to hide the imperfections on his own voice. You can even tell how annoyed he can be at himself in the bloopers from the White Album and even the early Beatle years where, Paul was constantly performing these tracks in such a perfect way and John was struggling to finish the track because of how much strain he was putting in his voice and how much effort he had to put in even to perform the most simple of tracks. When I look back at the interviews, that's what I get from it, and honestly I think that he grew out of it and he was able to acknowledge Paul for his great songwriting, especially after the Silly Love Songs came out, because here's the thing, you don't always need to have a complex track. You don't always need to have a complex melody and this whole political bullshit that John Lennon was about at the time. Sometimes you just want a nice love song, and what's wrong with that? That's what Paul McCartney said with that song, and I completely agree with it. I'm not really a fan of Paul McCartney's discography at that point. I don't think that Wings at the Speed of Sound, that the album that song come from, it's a great album. It's actually a really big piece of shit, but I still agree that, the early love tracks from Paul McCartney were some of the most enjoyable tracks he made. So yeah, I believe that if you're one of these people that believe that Paul only knows how to write love songs and that he was only in the Beatles because of his cuteness and his ability to perform nice melodies, you should definitely check out albums like Ram, Wildlife, Ben on the Run, and if you want to go to the Beatles discography, almost every single fucking song from Abbey Road, almost every single fucking song from the White Album, a fair majority of the songs in Revolver are great. Such great songs that I was just impressed because I thought I was going to jump on the internet and it was just going to be one or two idiots say that Paul doesn't really know how to write good music or interesting or unique music as they call it. But it was just a huge amount of people thinking that this was true, and yeah, that's the reason why I wanted to make this video. Paul McCartney is one of the greatest songwriters ever, one of the greatest performers ever, and one of the greatest artists of all time. Period. That is it for today's video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the videos that I upload. Please do remember that this is only my personal opinion, so if you have your own, go ahead and leave a down below in the comments. Respectfully, please. A lot of people are insulting quite a lot saying that I clickbait the fuck out of these videos. I don't. Every time that I put one of these things in the title is because I'm quoting someone else. I'm talking about a comment that someone else said. I don't actually say these things. Like, that's the reason why I put quotes on it. Respectfully, go ahead and leave your comment down below so we can all have a beautiful and healthy debate in the comment section like I love to do. So with that being said, once again, I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope that I can see you guys soon with a new video. But until then, bye.